I died on April 17th, 2024, but that's not the shocking part. The real shock came after, when I opened my eyes in a place no man can reach while breathing, and stood face to face with Jesus Christ himself. If you think you've heard stories like this before, I promise you, this one is different. I didn't just see the afterlife. I was given a message about 2025 so urgent, so specific, that it's been burning in my bones ever since. I can't keep it to myself. I wasn't supposed to. And if you're hearing this now, then maybe, just maybe, you were meant to. The day started like any other patrol, and that's the part that still haunts me. How normal it all felt, how routine it seemed, right up until the very end. We were just outside a dusty little village in northern Syria, a place no one had heard of, flagged by intel for some kind of strange electronic interference. We didn't know what it meant, just that we were supposed to check it out. Orders came in, and we moved out, 6 of us, tight formation. I was the point man. I remember double-checking my rifle, tightening my gear, scanning the horizon. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that hums under your skin. I've been in combat zones long enough to know when something's not right, and that morning, everything was off. The air was heavy, like it knew what was coming before we did. The kids who usually ran alongside our convoy were nowhere in sight. The barking dogs, gone. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. I told the guys to stay sharp. I said it without thinking, but something in my gut twisted when the words came out. We entered the village, weapons up, eyes on the rooftops. Nothing moved, no sounds, no birds, no calls to prayer, just that eerie, oppressive silence. And then, it happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't what movies would make it out to be. There was no heroic moment, no warning, just a faint whistle, like steam escaping a valve. And then, light. That was it. I blinked, and I was gone. Not passed out, not unconscious. Gone. At first, I didn't even know I was dead. It felt more like I'd stepped out of one scene and into another. One moment I was gripping my rifle, heart pounding, boots on sand. The next I was barefoot, standing in a field that stretched forever in every direction. There was no sun, but the place glowed. No sky, but everything above me shimmered like breath on glass. I looked down, no gear, no uniform, just me. Not naked, not exposed, but unburdened. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel anything like fear or pain. Instead, I felt like I had just woken up from a long sleep I didn't even know I'd been trapped in. I turned slowly, trying to make sense of where I was, and that's when I sensed him before I saw him. Not walking, not flying, just present. One moment, the space behind me was empty. The next, it was filled with a figure so overwhelming, so radiant, that it stopped every thought in my head. He didn't look like the paintings or stained glass images. He looked like light wrapped in authority. His robe moved like a living current. His face wasn't something I could stare at, but somehow, I saw it completely. And his eyes, they didn't just look at me. They looked through me, into me, beyond me. "You're not lost, Jackson," he said. I hadn't told him my name. I hadn't said a word, but he knew. Every part of me, every memory, every regret, every prayer I whispered in darkness. "You've just been reassigned," that's what he said. Reassigned. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. My heart froze in place. I wanted to ask who he was, but my soul already knew. There was no need for titles or introductions. I was standing in front of Jesus Christ, not the man from history books, not the image from church windows, the real one, the glorified one. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't my brain firing neurons in its final moments. It was more real than anything I'd ever felt on earth. The weight of his presence was like gravity and love and truth all at once. He stepped forward, and every molecule in my being vibrated as he spoke again. "You died in obedience, but I allowed it, because I need you to see what's coming. I need you to speak for those who are still blind." I couldn't answer. I couldn't even breathe. But I didn't need to. He wasn't asking me for permission, he was giving me a mission. And then, like peeling back layers of time, the field we stood on opened up, not like a crack, not like an explosion. It folded away like paper, revealing something beneath, something ancient, something urgent. That's when everything I thought I understood about life, death, and what lies beyond began to unravel. The moment that field pulled away, everything around me changed again. I was no longer standing on solid ground, yet I wasn't falling. It was as if I was being carried, not by hands, not by wind, but by purpose. And as I moved, I began to see the Earth, but not as we see it from space. This wasn't a globe or a satellite view. It was like I was looking at time itself layered over the world. Jesus stood beside me again, without moving, without appearing. He was just there, constant, unshaken, like he was stitched into the fabric of everything around us. He pointed, and suddenly I was watching my own death, not as a memory, but as an unfolding event. I saw the drone that had ended my life, sleek, silent, unseen from the ground. I watched the moment the command was given, thousands of miles away, a button pressed in a cold room. No emotion, no hesitation, just code and command. Then, fire, a precision strike, instant. My body crumpled in the blast, lifeless before it hit the dirt. But it wasn't the explosion that shook me. It was what came after. I saw things I'd never imagined, entities I could never have dreamed. Through the smoke and debris, dark figures moved, not with menace, but with method. They weren't attacking, they were collecting. Souls, drifting, wandering, lost. Men I knew, my brothers in arms, caught in confusion, their spirits trapped in a space between realms. I turned to Jesus, my voice shaking. What are those? He didn't blink. They are the souls who died without direction, men who fought with courage but for the wrong kingdom. That cut deep. I had always believed I was fighting for freedom, for good. I believed my service had meaning. Jesus read my thoughts before I could speak them. You were brave, he said. You were obedient, but only those aligned with my kingdom are gathered into glory. His words were neither cruel nor comforting. They were just truth, undeniable, piercing, complete. I wanted to argue, to plead, to say I hadn't known. But he wasn't condemning me, he was preparing me. Suddenly, the space around us shifted again. We weren't watching the battlefield anymore. We were somewhere higher, deeper, beyond time. A vast horizon opened in every direction, and then it came into view, the doorway. It didn't look like a door at all, not in the way we understand it. It was made of light, memory, intention. It rippled with every moment I'd ever lived, good and bad, seen and secret. I could see flashes of my childhood, decisions I'd made without thinking, prayers I'd whispered through clenched teeth in the middle of the night. Everything I'd done or failed to do was woven into this gate, and somehow it was alive. It didn't judge me. It revealed me. Jesus looked at me again. You must pass through, he said, but only what is eternal can enter. I hesitated, not out of fear, but because I could feel parts of me already beginning to fall away, like old armor no longer needed. My shame, my anger, my pride, my fear of failure, even my medals, those badges I'd clung to, those validations of worth, they dissolved into light and vanished. With every step, I felt less like a soldier and more like a soul, raw, bare, real. When I finally crossed the threshold, I wasn't met with empty space. I was met with presence, a light that didn't blind but revealed, a peace that didn't quiet but awakened. The air itself was alive, thick with meaning, full of sound that wasn't sound and movement that wasn't motion. I was surrounded by witnesses, not angels, not exactly people, but something in between. Saints, martyrs, believers who had died in faith, not for attention, not for recognition, but out of love. They looked at me and nodded. One stepped close and whispered, "Tell them, Jackson, time is no longer what it seems." Another added, 2025 begins the birth pains. The shaking is not coming. It has begun. I turned to Jesus, the question heavy in my chest. What's happening in 2025? He didn't answer with words. He opened the sky. And what I saw next would change everything. Time unraveled before me, not as a timeline, but as a living tapestry. I saw threads of decisions, pulses of light, waves of darkness. The Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a battlefield of choices. Jesus stepped to my side again and said, "This is why you're here." The field, the doorway, the pain, the revelation, it had all led to this moment, to witness, to carry the message, to return with fire in my bones, because 2025 isn't just another year on the calendar. It's the line, the test, the hinge that will swing nations toward light or let them fall into shadows. And those who've been sleeping, they're running out of time. He led me forward, past that horizon of revelation, and into something that pulsed with memory and eternity at the same time. I felt the atmosphere itself shift. The light became heavier, like it carried knowledge, like truth had weight here. And then I saw it. Rising from the center of a vast open space was a structure, not made of stone or wood, but of shifting light and living words. It shimmered like glass, yet stood solid, unmoving. The very foundation hummed, not with noise, but with meaning. It vibrated deep in my spirit like a sound I'd always known but had forgotten how to hear. "This is the book of Earth's final decisions," Jesus said, his voice like thunder wrapped in compassion. As we approached, I noticed the walls were inscribed with language, not just English or Hebrew or Latin, but tongues I'd never seen, and yet somehow I could read them. They weren't just writing, they were testimonies, choices. Every prayer, every betrayal, every moment of surrender and rebellion etched into the living stone. At the heart of the structure stood a pedestal, and upon it sat a massive book. Not dusty, not old, but radiant. The book moved as if it breathed. Pages fluttered without wind, letters flowed like liquid, then hardened into shape. I asked, "What's written inside?" And Jesus responded with a look that made my knees shake. "Everything. What your world has chosen, and everything it has refused." The book began to open on its own. The first pages were filled with events, names, moments. But these weren't like history books. These were alive. The pages shimmered, glowing with actions taken and words spoken. I could see them play out, not like memories but like echoes of real-time decisions, acts of love, moments of compromise, decisions no one else had seen, yet here they were, carved into eternity. And then it turned to a page titled with a date I'll never forget. At the top, it read, 2025. I braced myself. I expected to see leaders, governments, wars, collapses, but what I saw shocked me more than any battle ever had. I saw a mother praying alone in her kitchen at midnight. I saw a teenage boy delete a secret addiction, shaking but determined. I saw a young girl give her lunch to a stranger, then walk away without looking back. Each of these small, quiet acts lit the page up like fire. They burned with intensity, more powerful than any political summit or global declaration. Jesus looked at me. "These," he said, "are the decisions that shape the future." And then the light began to dim. The page trembled, and new marks appeared, not glowing, but hollow. I saw blank spaces, empty rooms, doors that had never been opened. I asked, "What are these?" He spoke slowly, heavily. "These are the prayers never spoken, the forgiveness never offered, the kindness withheld. These absences, they create openings." I watched as those openings, those spiritual gaps, began to darken. Shadows slithered into them, quietly, subtly, without resistance. "The enemy doesn't need an invitation," Jesus said. "He only needs an opening." What he showed me next shattered the illusion that our small choices don't matter. I watched as seemingly harmless habits turned into footholds for darkness. I saw how apathy, just simple, everyday spiritual laziness, gave birth to confusion. I saw how delayed obedience bred disobedience. I watched tiny cracks become canyons. But then Jesus reached out and placed his hand on the open page. The shadows paused, the darkness recoiled. "But there is hope," he said, "because the book is still being written." That's when I realized something. This wasn't just a record. It was a warning and a calling. What happens next hasn't been sealed. We're still living the words that will appear on these pages. And the smallest act of obedience, no matter how hidden or painful, has the power to change the course of nations. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with purpose. "You will remind them of this. he said. You will tell them that their decisions in 2025 matter more than they could possibly imagine. Then the book closed itself, not with finality, but with anticipation. As it shut, the air grew heavier again, not with fear, but with purpose. The atmosphere thickened as if everything around me was leaning in, waiting. That's when Jesus raised his hand again and swept it gently through the air. Suddenly I saw the earth, not as a sphere, but as a living map, alive with threads of time, decisions, and consequence. He looked at me, and the tone of everything shifted. 2025, he said, is not just a year. It is a hinge, a turning point. A great sorting has already begun. The map beneath us transformed. I saw threads moving out from the present, some bright, some flickering, some black as coal. These were the choices humanity would make in 2025. They weren't locked in. They responded to action, to silence, to love, to fear. Then two timelines became clearer than all the others. One glowed like gold, fragile but gaining strength. It was built from humility, repentance, truth, compassion. I saw families returning to prayer, not because it was trendy, but because they were desperate. I saw fathers apologizing, mothers forgiving, children worshipping in living rooms lit by candlelight, not by spotlight. The second timeline was louder, sharper. It surged like electricity built on division, digital noise, artificial comfort. I saw people more connected than ever, but completely isolated, scrolling, swiping, consuming. I saw churches filled with branding and light shows, but devoid of substance. I saw truth called hate, and lies dressed in tolerance. I saw entire generations drowning in distractions, unable to hear the whisper of God over the roar of their own entertainment. Jesus didn't look away from either timeline, he stared directly at both. Your generation will decide which one becomes reality, he said. The war is not coming. It has already begun. He turned to me, more serious than I had ever seen him. Tell them. Tell them that truth in 2025 will cost more than ever before, but silence will cost their souls. And in that moment, I saw everything differently. I understood that what's coming isn't something we can fight with politics or protests or platforms. What's coming is spiritual, and only those who are anchored in truth will stand. Not those with followers, but those with faith. Not those with charisma, but those with conviction. The battle is already here. The sword has already dropped. And we are the deciding factor. He took me deeper still, away from the timelines and the book of decisions, into a place that felt like the space between worlds. There was no sky, no floor, no boundary, just an endless expanse filled with living presence. The silence wasn't empty, it was thick with truth, the kind that doesn't need to speak to be understood. And there, in that realm beyond comprehension, I began to see them. Not famous names, not mighty preachers or global leaders, but simple people, hidden people, men and women with no followers, no platforms, no influence by worldly standards. And yet they burned with something I couldn't explain. A mark pulsed on their hearts, visible not to the world, but undeniable in the spirit. These were not the celebrated, they were the surrendered. They were janitors, widows, farmers, prisoners, teenagers, single mothers. Some were quiet intercessors who'd been praying faithfully in their bedrooms for decades. Some were nurses who'd comforted the dying with scripture no one else dared to read aloud. Others were elderly men who had given their entire lives to serve without ever being thanked. I saw one woman kneeling in a dark room, hands raised, whispering prayers over names she'd never met. Every time she spoke, it sent waves into the atmosphere, shock waves that bent the fabric of time like ripples through still water. These people didn't command crowds, but they commanded heaven. Jesus looked at me and said, "These are my hidden soldiers, the ones the world ignores, but all of heaven watches." He showed me how their obedience created impact far greater than any viral video or trending message. Every time one of them knelt to pray, I saw chains break in cities they had never visited. I saw angels dispatched in response, not because of eloquence, but because of sincerity. I watched as dark regions flickered with light from their faithfulness. The enemy cannot trace them, Jesus said, because they move by assignment, not ambition. I saw that clearly. These weren't people chasing influence, they were chasing him. They didn't care about applause, they cared about alignment. Then he looked at me again. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the space like thunder hidden inside a whisper. You were one of them, he said, and now I'm calling you back to remind the others. I felt something burn into my chest, not fire that consumes, but fire that marks, that purifies, that sets apart. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a messenger now, not of opinion, but of truth. I didn't choose it. I was chosen for it, and with that came weight, eternal weight. But what he showed me next shook me more than anything before. It wasn't the nations or the politics or the war. It was the deception, the great veil sweeping across the earth. It began as a cloud, dark, silent, hovering over every nation. But as it moved closer, I saw it wasn't smoke. It was screens, endless screens, phones, tablets, digital lenses, holograms, billboards, embedded neural devices, all glowing, all captivating. And everywhere I looked, people were staring into them, not possessed, not robotic, just numb, detached, entranced. This, Jesus said, is the great veil, the distraction masquerading as connection. I saw people scrolling through curated outrage, artificial joy, digital perfection. Their spirits were starving, but their minds were overflowing with algorithms. They were full, but empty, informed, but blind, connected, but completely alone. I saw families sitting together but miles apart, each one locked into their own private reality. Children raised by avatars, marriages falling apart while smiling selfies were posted for the world, pastors measuring success in clicks instead of conviction. But then it got darker, because the screens weren't just tools, they had become idols. I watched as digital prophets rose, AI-generated figures preaching comfort without conviction, virtual saviors offering peace without surrender, messages crafted by code, telling people what they wanted to hear, wrapped in the language of love, but void of truth. And people followed them, millions. They bowed not with their knees, but with their attention. And slowly, the image of Jesus in their minds began to change, not into a beast, but into a brand, clean, convenient, non-confrontational, no cross, no blood, no obedience, just acceptance without repentance. Jesus looked at me again. The deception of 2025, he said, won't come through fear, it will come through comfort. That's when I saw how even believers, those who claim to follow him, were being swept into it. Not all at once, but little by little, trading discernment for data, swapping prayer for podcasts, looking for signs on TikTok instead of seeking my voice in silence. I watched influencers rise, their words sharp but hollow, their smiles convincing, but their spirits empty. Many, he said, will follow the spirit of Antichrist without knowing, because it will look like progress, it will sound like peace, it will feel like unity. He showed me systems being installed across nations, technology created to monitor, manage, and predict behavior, not for safety, but for control, all in the name of health, of harmony, of global unity. But under the surface was a structure meant to suppress. Truth was being rewritten, not with fire, but with code, and reality itself was becoming optional. But I have preserved voices, Jesus said, and you will call them out of hiding. Then he showed me something beautiful, small but powerful. A teenage boy in his room, deleting every app to seek God without distraction. A woman removing a digital implant and falling to her knees in raw repentance. A teacher refusing to teach the rewritten curriculum. Their actions were unseen by the world, but in the spirit, they lit up their entire communities. Like sparks in the darkness, one by one they broke the veil in their circle. They will break the spell, Jesus whispered, if they are warned in time. He turned to me, eyes burning with urgency. Warn them, Jackson. The deception isn't loud, it's subtle. It comes clothed in good intentions, and it will seduce even the elect unless they awaken, unless they return to the secret place unless they put down the screens and pick up the sword of truth again, because what's coming won't feel like a battle, it'll feel like a lullaby, and only those who are truly awake will recognize the sound of sleep. I couldn't take it anymore. Everything I'd seen, the book, the timelines, the veil of distraction, it was all crashing in on me like waves I couldn't hold back. I fell to my knees in that place between time and truth, not because I was afraid, but because the weight of what I now understood was too heavy to carry standing up. I broke, I wept, and Jesus let me. He didn't rush me, he didn't correct me. He let the tears fall until they became part of the ground I knelt on, because what was coming wasn't just a crisis, it was a reckoning. And in that moment, I saw the foundation of everything I'd trusted in begin to shake. Military power, national strength, economic security, global leadership. None of it would stand under what was about to arrive. The true strength of nations wouldn't be in their armies or alliances. It would be found in the hidden lives of the righteous, the humble, the obedient, the surrendered. Jesus turned and looked down on the earth again, not as a distant globe, but as a breathing, breaking world. And I saw the flags of every nation rise into the sky like smoke. Some were familiar, others I didn't recognize, but they all shook. One by one I watched as the strength they claimed to possess was tested and torn. I saw America, bold, proud and cracking under its own weight. The economy trembled like dry leaves in a storm. Leaders tried to hold control through fear, distraction and division, but it slipped through their hands like sand. Governments that had stood for generations began to fall, not by invasion but by exposure. Jesus showed me how secrets long buried in political systems would surface, how hidden corruption would come undone in daylight. He didn't say it with glee, he said it with sorrow and holy resolve. "My justice is not delayed," he said, "it is perfectly timed." I saw alliances between nations fracture overnight. Treaties broken not by disagreement, but by pressure revealing hidden agendas. Even churches, global movements that once stood together, began to split, not over style or music or leadership, but over truth itself. Many claimed his name, but he showed me how their foundation wasn't built on him, it was built on influence, and when the shaking intensified, they collapsed like houses built on sand. But then, he showed me something so small it almost went unnoticed. Little gatherings, groups of believers meeting in barns, basements, open fields. No stage, no platform, no social media, just fire. I heard them cry out, not with performance, but with purity. And from them came a sound I will never forget, a roar in the spirit that shook structures built by pride to their knees. "These are my people," Jesus said. "They have no microphones, but they carry my flame. They won't be found in headlines, but their prayers will shake nations." He looked at me again with that same intensity that had pierced me from the start. "Tell them not to trust in what can be shaken. Tell them to build what cannot be moved. Because in 2025, everything false will be tested, and only the rooted will stand." I thought that would be the end. I thought the message was complete. But then he turned and pointed toward a group I hadn't noticed before, scattered, quiet, not drawing attention to themselves, but glowing, not visibly, spiritually, like coals burning steady beneath the ashes. These weren't leaders or speakers, they were janitors, nurses, inmates, mechanics, orphans, widows. Many were completely unknown by the world, but each of them had a mark, a spiritual seal etched not on their skin but over their hearts. I could feel the weight of it from where I stood, obedience, purity, faith. They weren't perfect, they were faithful. "These," he said, "are my hidden ones, my remnant, my warriors. The battle in 2025 will not be won by those with influence, it will be won by those with alignment." I watched as each time one of them knelt to pray, it sent a tremor through the spiritual timeline. Darkness flinched, deception cracked, angels were dispatched like lightning, and they didn't even know the power they carried. Jesus looked back at me and spoke with undeniable authority. "They don't move by ambition, they move by assignment, and you were one of them, but now you return to call the others." Then he touched my chest again, and I felt it, the seal, the fire, the calling. It wasn't an emotional moment, it was a commissioning. I wasn't just returning to earth as a survivor, I was returning as a messenger, marked by fire, called to ignite the ones who are still asleep. But before he sent me back, he showed me one final vision, one that shattered every assumption I'd ever had about impact and greatness. He opened his hand, and in the center of his palm appeared a single flame. Tiny, barely flickering. "This," he said, "is obedience." Then he dropped it into the darkness. The flame didn't explode. It didn't light up the world, but it created a perimeter, a sphere of light, a crack in the dark, a line the enemy couldn't cross. "Watch," he said, and as I did, other flames began to appear. One here, one there, small, quiet, unnoticed. But they connected, they spread, they touched, and slowly, the vast darkness began to break apart like shattered glass under pressure. "This is what one life can do," he said. "Not through shouting, not through striving, but through simple, consistent obedience." Then he showed me real people. A grandfather who had prayed every single morning for his grandchildren. His prayers had prevented 3 suicides and saved a young man who would become a missionary in a closed nation. A single mom who raised her children in truth despite being mocked and abandoned. One of her daughters would later translate scripture into a language no one else had touched, opening the gospel to millions. A prisoner who forgave the man who betrayed him, and that one act of forgiveness triggered a chain reaction that brought revival to an entire prison system. "Heaven measures impact differently," Jesus said. "In 2025, the loud will be ignored, but the faithful will shift the battle. One life fully surrendered still moves heaven." I collapsed again, not from exhaustion, but from realization. I had spent my life trying to do big things, but now I understood. It was never about being seen. It was about being surrendered. It wasn't about doing more. It was about obeying faster, trusting deeper, following closer. Then, Jesus leaned down, placed his hand on my shoulder once more and said, "Remind them that the greatest warfare is obedience in private. Tell them that the secret place will become the war room in 2025. That one whispered yes in the dark is louder in heaven than 1,000 shouted promises in public. Remind them that the war will not be won on stages, but on knees." I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face, and I whispered through trembling lips, "Then use me." And he did not smile with sentiment. He looked at me like a commander who knows his soldier is ready. Not because I was strong, but because I was finally surrendered. Then he asked me the question I wasn't prepared for. "Will you go back?" I hesitated. Not because I was afraid of Earth, but because no peace I had ever known compared to this place. No joy, no clarity, no wholeness, and yet I knew what I had to do. "If I go back," I asked, "will they listen?" He stepped closer, his gaze unshakable. "Some will ignore you, some will mock you, others will accuse you of lying, but the ones who need it, the ones who are mine, they will hear." He reached out and pressed something invisible but eternal into my chest. I couldn't see it, but I felt the weight of it. It was calling. It was mission. It was fire. "You will speak with fire in your bones," he said. "Not to gather followers, not to build a platform, but to warn the chosen and awaken the sleeping." I looked at him one last time, overwhelmed, undone, reborn. "What if I forget?" I asked. "What if the world numbs me again?" His eyes never wavered. "You won't forget," he said, "because the fire I've placed in you is not for memory. It is for mission." And in a flash, the realm of glory vanished. The weight of eternity pulled back, and I felt it. The pull back into time, into flesh, into breath. The moment I re-entered the world, I was gasping, coughing, eyes blurred by smoke. I was back on Earth, back in the rubble of the strike that had killed me. My ears rang, my chest burned, but not from wounds, from fire. Fire I had carried from that place. And even though I couldn't speak clearly, I turned my head to the medic leaning over me and whispered, "I saw him." That was just the beginning, because now I'm telling you, I was dead. I saw Jesus, and I came back carrying a warning. 2025 will demand a decision, and the time to choose is now.